Joseph S. Nye Jr. Soft Power: The Means to Success in World Politics. You might be familiar with the phrase, "you catch more flies with honey rather than vinegar." This more or less sums up the idea of soft power. It's a way of getting what you want through attraction and persuasion rather than brute force. So while hard power can be exemplified by military action, sanctions and harsh trade policies, soft power is the domain of diplomacy, friendly foreign relations, cultural exports, international sports, and general cooperation. To use another metaphor, hard power is often a carrot and stick situation, using coercion or bribery and often spending a lot of money to get what you want in a unilateral way. Soft power, on the other hand, is sometimes referred to as appealing to the hearts and minds and winning over people in a more bilateral way. America's enthusiasm for using soft power has had its ups and downs over the years. The thing to keep in mind here is that the work this blink explores was published in 2004, not long after the events of 9/11, and at a time when the world's political and technological landscape was quite different. A lot has changed since then. But even so, the author was quite prescient about how the internet would play a major factor in the use of soft power going forward, and why the US shouldn't take its position as a superpower for granted. The value of soft power. Soft power and hard power are two different ways to get what you want. But soft power offers strategic advantages in spreading your message and getting allies on your side. Throughout most of its history, the US has been driven to spread the message of democracy and personal freedoms that are contained in its constitution. When it comes to soft power being used to effective ends, nothing illustrates this better than what happened in the aftermath of World War II. The Marshall Plan, wherein the US invested billions of dollars and worked cooperatively with other nations to rebuild Europe, is a prime example. America didn't unilaterally force the plan. That would be closer to hard power. Instead, it sought support and bilateral agreements with other governments. In doing so, it generated a lot of goodwill towards the US from around the world, which is one of the real strengths of soft power. But to really see the effectiveness of soft power, let's look at what happened after the Marshall Plan, when the Soviet Union and the US entered into the long Cold War era. During this time, American pop culture seeped in behind the Iron Curtain through channels like Radio Free Europe, where Soviets could listen to rock and roll. American music, movies, and products like Coca-Cola and Hershey's chocolate bars can end up representing the values and appeal of a nation, thereby becoming tools of soft power. Such efforts can be cooperative, too. British movies and the Beatles also played a large role in appealing to the younger generation of Soviets and spreading the message that helped thaw the Cold War. This is how soft power works. By making others admire and aspire to your values, you can guide their actions without force. More recently, however, the US has been struggling in this department. America displayed immense hard power during the Iraq War in 2003, and in doing so it cared little about garnering international support. Global opinions of the US plummeted dramatically, even among long-time allies, not to mention the populations in Iraq and Afghanistan most directly impacted by the military intervention. Technology has also changed the landscape dramatically. The internet has complicated the ways in which we can share and shape our narratives. Transnational actors, including corporations and NGOs, also wield significant influence. Terrorist groups also use these same channels to attract support and recruit by tapping into broader narratives and grievances. All of this makes politics a competition for legitimacy and credibility, which is where soft power becomes much more useful than hard power. Perhaps now more than ever, the US must understand how essential it is to balance hard and soft power. Relying solely on military might can lead to costly and unsustainable outcomes. Meanwhile, leveraging soft power can build lasting alliances and foster environments where shared values and mutual respect guide international relations. This blend of hard and soft power, often referred to as smart power, is crucial for navigating the complexities of global politics today. In the following sections, we'll get deeper into how soft power has been effectively used in the past and look at how other nations have taken advantage of it as well. A tool for changing minds. While there was a sharp rise in anti-American sentiment in the wake of the Iraq War, this wasn't the first time the US was looked down upon by its peers. Since America has often been synonymous with modernity, it's always been a source of discomfort for those resistant to change. In the 19th century, both European conservatives and radicals viewed America with suspicion. This sentiment persists today due to America's association, both rightly and wrongly, with globalization. Many countries simply deem America's cultural influence as intrusive. In 2002, a poll revealed that majorities in 34 of 43 countries thought the spread of American ideas and customs was negative. This reflects a broader trend where resentment of American power intertwines with resistance to globalization. Still, American culture, despite its glitz and controversies, continues to embody values like openness and individualism which attract global audiences. This cultural influence, a major component of soft power, was important during the Vietnam War, which, much like the Iraq War, damaged America's reputation abroad. Another important aspect of soft power is that it can work in opposition to government policy. In the 1960s and 70s, Hollywood and the music industry were actively exporting pop culture that was keeping open, liberal, democratic ideals alive, even when at odds with official government positions. These continued to appeal to younger generations abroad and proved that the US was still a place where artistic freedom was alive and well. That said, perceived hypocrisy can undermine this attraction. For example, while American individualism, democratic ideals, and human rights advocacy can attract global admiration, it can also ring hollow when confronted with certain domestic policies like capital punishment and gun control. Post-9/11 policies such as stricter immigration controls and perceived religious intolerance have also damaged America's image abroad. Foreign policy can also undermine a nation's soft power. The US has benefited and gained allies by promoting shared values like democracy and human rights. But when the Bush administration took unilateral action and proceeded in Iraq without a UN mandate, it came across as hypocritical and arrogant, reducing America's appeal. Multilateralism, by contrast, legitimizes American power and fosters cooperation. Balancing strength with humility in foreign policy enhances both America's soft power and global legitimacy. Soft power around the world. Of course, the US isn't the only country that benefits from well-deployed soft power and struggles when it's disregarded. In this section, we'll look at a few of the big players and their various strategies. Following World War II, the Soviet Union was America's main rival in terms of soft power. At first, many Europeans admired their resistance to Hitler during World War II. The colonized nations in Africa and Asia also looked up to the USSR for their opposition to European imperialism. The promise of a utopian communist future drew many followers worldwide. High post-war economic growth rates bolstered the Soviet Union's image, and the 1957 launch of Sputnik suggested technological superiority. Their cultural investments in ballet, Olympic sports, and classical music were also significant. But despite these early successes, the Soviet Union was a closed system. Its aggressive foreign policy and its lack of pop culture exports limited its soft power appeal. Conversely, in 1989, after Mikhail Gorbachev finally changed Soviet policies and brought an end to the Cold War, Soviet favorability ratings rose considerably across Western Europe. More recently, Europe has been the closest competitor to the US in soft power. European art, literature, music, fashion, and food are all influential global forces. European countries are consistently seen as positive forces in addressing global issues like terrorism, poverty, and environmental protection. While the US performs better in areas like job creation, Europe resonates more with younger populations globally on domestic policies like capital punishment, gun control, and climate change. While it's not an EU member, Norway's soft power stands out. Despite its small population of 5 million and the lack of an international language or cultural exports, Norway has managed to make a significant impact. They achieve most of their public diplomacy through actions rather than broadcasting. Whenever an international crisis arises, Norway is always there, eager to work as an intermediary for finding a peaceful solution. In doing so, they're consistently a major player with significant soft power and a clear message. Norway is a global force for peace. Asian countries, on the other hand, have rich cultural histories that contribute to their soft power. China, in particular, has experienced rapid economic growth that has enhanced its reputation, but its soft power is limited by domestic policies and a lack of intellectual freedom. Similar issues are seen in India. Their economy is on the rise as well, and its movies and cuisine have far-reaching appeal. But domestic policies, such as religious intolerance towards its Muslim population, present a problem when it comes to being able to wield soft power on the global stage. Japan, despite its economic challenges, has a strong cultural influence through pop culture, traditional arts, and cuisine. However, historical tensions and demographic challenges pose a potential limit to Japan's soft power. Japan has never reconciled with its history during World War II, which has made relations with neighbouring countries problematic. It's also been very closed off toward immigration, which presents a serious problem as the population grows older. In the final sections, we'll look at some of the details behind the strategic use of soft power, as well as some of the problems that need to be addressed. We'll also figure out what America needs to do in order to improve its soft power going forward. A different form of diplomacy. In today's world, information is power. With the dawn of the internet and improved technologies, the cost of processing and transmitting information has dropped dramatically. This has led to an explosion of information, creating what some call a paradox of plenty. As a result, credibility is a major factor. Trusted editors and opinion leaders play a significant role in this oversaturated media landscape. Who can we rely on to filter out the noise and propaganda? Governments aren't just competing with each other, but also with news media, corporations, NGOs, and scientific communities. This is where public diplomacy comes in. Public diplomacy involves engaging not just with foreign governments, but also with individuals and organizations. It's not just about propaganda or public relations, it's about building long-term relationships that support government policies. There are 3 dimensions to public diplomacy. The first is daily communications. This involves explaining the context of policy decisions, focusing on both domestic and foreign audiences. The second is strategic communication. Here you develop simple, consistent themes, much like an effective advertising campaign. The third dimension is long-term relationships. This is about building bridges and international connections through things like university scholarships, exchange programs, seminars, and conferences. Some argue that market forces should handle the presentation of American culture abroad, but this view is short-sighted. Market forces are invariably going to focus on messages with the broadest appeal. Successful soft power needs to present a multidimensional image. Cooperative public diplomacy is the more effective way to manage complex global tasks like peacekeeping and counter-terrorism. Long-term strategies involving cultural and educational exchanges are crucial for these complex tasks as well. These can foster more open societies and help overcome the negative aspects of propaganda by allowing people to experience a culture firsthand. People who understand both America's strengths and its flaws are often the most effective spokespersons. Companies, foundations, universities, and other organizations can contribute significantly to these efforts. Post 9/11, the need for public diplomacy became evident, but the US has nonetheless struggled to adapt. America invests relatively little in soft power compared to other countries. To improve, It needs to change attitudes both at home and abroad, learning to listen as well as communicate. The future is smart power. The US has bounced back from being unpopular before, but that was often during the Cold War when other countries feared the Soviet Union more. Still, the US is in a position to rely on a mix of both soft and hard power and use similar Cold War strategies which involved alliances and institutions that lasted decades. Addressing post-9/11 threats requires international cooperation, which hinges on America's attractiveness. For instance, Pakistan's President Musharraf had to balance cooperation with the US while also managing anti-American sentiments from his own citizens. If the US made efforts to use soft power and increase its popularity abroad, cooperation would be more forthcoming. To recover lost soft power, the US needs to boost its public diplomacy budget and enhance exchanges that allow diverse, non-governmental sectors to interact globally. Current student visa policies that limit such contacts are counterproductive. Face-to-face interactions are crucial, as shown by the success of cultural exchange programs during the Cold War. But America also needs to come up with some new, more inventive approaches, such as encouraging American students to study abroad, rethinking the Peace Corps, and creating programs for foreigners to teach in US schools. Public diplomacy should focus on everyday life and services that people value in other regions, like the Middle East. Adjusting the style and substance of foreign policy is essential. Sometimes fundamental interests must be preserved, but tactics and presentation can be adjusted. US presidents and politicians need to avoid unnecessary insults to allies. As British Prime Minister Tony Blair once said, "A nation can improve its global image by promoting partnerships built on persuasion rather than coercion and force." America's future success hinges on understanding and balancing soft power with hard power, achieving what is known as smart power. This approach has worked before, and it can work again. The main takeaway of this blink to soft power by Joseph S. Nye Jr. is that soft power is of growing importance in the modern world. It allows countries to achieve their goals through attraction rather than coercion. By using culture, political values and policies, we can effectively influence global politics. Policies like the Marshall Plan and the influence of American culture during the Cold War show how soft power can guide actions and create lasting change without the use of force. Following the Iraq War, there has been a steep decline in US soft power. Poor foreign policy decisions have underscored the need for a balanced approach, combining both hard and soft power, known as smart power. This blend, along with a more open policy for cross-cultural exchange, is crucial for building lasting alliances and fostering cooperation in the complex landscape of today's global politics.